All right, welcome to the PWI podcast. I'm your host, PWI senior writer Al Castle, joined as always by my co-host Brian Solomon. How's it going, Brian?
Going very well. Happy to be here as always.
Yes, and seeing as we are in WrestleMania season, we've got something of a WrestleMania legend and a magazine a legend as well. Keith Elliot Greenberg. One of the, I talk about some of my favorite guests being these famous names from Pro Wrestling Illustrated and the Stanley Weston magazines. Yours is right up there, even though you were with the competition at the time when I was growing up. But thanks so much for coming on. You've got a new book on, what's widely considered, if not the greatest, the first kind of like the prototype of how you do a WrestleMania. Tell us about your new book.
Yes, the book is called Bigger, Better, Badder, WrestleMania III and the Year It All Changed. And essentially, it not only looks at the circumstances that led up to WrestleMania III, but what was going on in the rest of the wrestling industry and how WrestleMania III truly transformed what the wrestling business was to where it is today. Because as you know, people no longer just show up in, say, Las Vegas for WrestleMania itself. They come for WrestleMania week. WrestleCon is not associated with WWE. WWE has WWE World, which is pretty cool. They have NXT. There's all types of WWE events. But this year, for instance, I'm going to a wrestling themed drag show with Kelly
Really?
Alicia Fox, and Gail Kim as judges. My friend Josh Rice is doing a pro wrestling puppet show, and I'm actually going to sign some books there. So there are documentaries, there are comedy nights, and there are promotions from all over the world showcasing, their style of wrestling.
Yeah.
But none of that would exist had WrestleMania III not sold at an NFL stadium in 1987, and the world had not received the message that it was acceptable now to make WrestleMania into a pilgrimage. It was no longer meathead entertainment. I think in some circles, they still condescended toward wrestling, but the acknowledgement that it was big business and it would draw people was a turning point.
Yeah. So one of the reasons we wanted to have you on is, again, we're a few weeks away from WrestleMania. We're not going to do the full WrestleMania 41 preview here, but I did think it was interesting to use, again, sort of the formula that was created for WrestleMania 3, and that I think a lot of successful WrestleManias have followed, and talk about how maybe it applies to this year's WrestleMania. We haven't had it yet, so I mean, some of it is sort of speculation.
Yeah, but we know what the matches are.
Yes, but it's not just the card. And that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about. As far as what did WrestleMania 3 get right? I mean, do you see a certain formula of everything, whether main event, undercard, venue, city, production value, all of it?
Well, that's an interesting thing. I just had a talk earlier, well, it was last week, with a cameraman I was working with on a non-wrestling project who grew up in Detroit. And he said city-wise, everyone in Detroit was caught up in it, but it was so hard. I mean, he was a kid at the time. He said it was so hard to get to the Silverdome. But people did. They still sat in traffic and got there. So I guess in that regard, they had it right because, and this had happened before. I remember one of the Starcades, and Brian, you probably know this. There was one of the Starcades, I think it was Steamboat and Youngblood were facing Slaughter and Kernodle for the title of this. Was it Starcade 84?
That was actually, I know what you're talking about. It was the final conflict, or so I think they called it. And that was a lead up to Starcade.
Remember those stories? Right. But do you remember those stories about how like Steamboat and Slaughter almost couldn't get to the
yes.
There was
right.
so much traffic.
The traffic was so backed up, right? That people, it was like, it made the local news how it was so snarled up. And I think that because it was, I think, in early '83, and that was the show where they started thinking like, hey, we could really do something here. If we have the ability with the right angle to draw something like that, we could put it on closed circuit. We could make it like a big event. And I think it was sort of like the proto Starcade.
Right. So, I mean, and I think now again, that traffic jam took place in Greensboro and did not receive a lot of national attention. This was in the Detroit metro area.
Right.
And Vince McMahon, as Brian and I have previously discussed, made sure that pay-per-view was blacked out in I think the state of Michigan. So the closest place to view a closed circuit telecast was Lorain, Ohio, which was well over 100 miles away.
Really? Wow.
So that ensured that everybody who was there would have no choice but to go to WrestleMania. Now, obviously, it's a very different business model. People are flying in from all over the world. So, blacking out WrestleMania 41 in the Vegas area doesn't make much of a difference. Also, people are now paying, what would the average WrestleMania ticket? The cheapest WrestleMania.
Right now, I mean, I know because I've been looking. They do it over 2 days, and basically the lowest price to get in the building for 2 days would work out to about $500 a day. So about
$500 a day.
$1,000, and that's essentially nosebleeds behind the screen kind of thing.
Right. Right.
What
So,
were they back then? Yeah, that's something I've been interested in. What would a ringside seat to the Silverdome have cost you?
well, I know this. Brian and I, as you know, in addition to Brian writing for PWI, we also write for Inside the Ropes magazine in the UK. And I interviewed the Trinidad flag guy for a column I wrote a few months ago. And, the guy who's always holding up the Trinidad flag. And he told me that WrestleMania rings, because he likes to be in the front row. He goes, it's so expensive. He could take that money and go to something like 3 months of SmackDowns in a row. So
Okay.
he opts not to sit in the first row for Mania, but he sits there for SummerSlam and Survivor Series. And he wasn't in the first row in Saudi Arabia, but he did go.
Al,
Yeah.
did you I think we've talked about this, but Al, were you at WrestleMania 10 at the Garden?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
okay.
I probably paid
You were too.
20.
I was there.
Yeah.
I was there. And you, I think Callie and Aaron were all there.
Well, no, you're thinking of Keith, you're thinking of WrestleMania
no, I
20.
didn't go to
20 was there also. Those were all-
WrestleMania 20 at the
not.
Garden, I didn't get to go because my wife was very, very pregnant at the time, and I didn't feel right leaving her that far away in case something happened. But WrestleMania 10, the reason I brought it up in '94, I had a seat not on the floor, but 100 section, which at the Garden is like the first level off the floor. They're very good seats because you could
Yeah, they're
really
great
see, and no
Yeah.
one can block you. I paid about $55 a seat, as I remember it. It was about, I think, $55 for.
Yeah, I saw yesterday a ticket price map for WrestleMania 19 in Safeco in Seattle, which I also went to, and it's probably the best seats I ever had to WrestleMania. I was essentially right next to the entryway, the ramp coming in, and I didn't remember what I paid for it, but they showed it on this map, and they were $100. That was 19 years ago.
Right. I mean, and $55, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
That's all that those seats cost. And I know those seats in the Garden. Now, I was not at WrestleMania 10. There was, I think Ed Raschuti might have just stepped down, and Vince Russo may have just come.
Sounds right. Yeah.
And I chatted with Vince Russo, but we hadn't become friends yet. We did become friends. And so it was this in-between period, and I was a freelancer. I tried to get in, but I didn't. I watched it at home. But
When for WrestleMania 3, did you go? Where'd you see it? Were you expecting
I
to go?
actually watched my part of Queens did not have WrestleMania. We didn't have not WrestleMania. We didn't have cable yet.
Yeah.
I didn't either.
We didn't get cable till '89. I remember I was at the movie theater. I saw A Fish Called Wanda, and I saw a girl from high school in the movie theater, and I started dating her briefly. And she lived like a mile away from me, but she had cable. And like I came over her place, and I realized like there was a certain night of the week when a world class championship wrestling was on. So I always arranged the dates, when world class was on. And like one time, and it was on late. And I remember one time she'd fallen asleep and she came out of the bedroom, and I was in the living room watching world class championship wrestling. And she's like, "Do you come here for me? Or do you come here for Gar?" You know, it's-
Wait, now
we all know what the answer.
I I have a
Who knows?
story. I hope you'll indulge me, Al, if I could tell. It's WrestleMania related / girl related, and this reminded me of that. So I was a huge wrestling fan around that time, 87, 88. I was like really into it. Then I got away from it when I started high school for a little bit, partly because of girls. So like 89,
That usually
90,
happens.
yeah, it happens. But here's the thing.
With girls, and you drift from wrestling.
I
Until you
came
realize
back to
wrestling
it.
is better than girls.
It's more dependable, right? I I came back to it later on in college, but for like 90, 89, 90, I was really off the grid. Like I really didn't follow it at all. But I was dating this girl in high school. It was kind of like my high school sweetheart, I guess. And I didn't realize this, but her dad was a big wrestling fan. So I'm at her house and we're on the couch listening to music and, a boy and a girl on a couch listening to music and a conversation. All of a sudden, I said something like, I saw something in the apartment or the house. And I said, "Oh, what's that?" She goes, "Oh, my dad, I don't know. He was watching WrestleMania. He ordered WrestleMania 6 and was watching it on pay-per-view the other day. I think because there was like something out on the table." And I stopped and I go, "Oh, that's right. Yeah, I guess it's around WrestleMania time." And I said, and she goes, "Yeah, he was really excited because I think he said the Ultimate Warrior beat Hulk Hogan and won the title." And I'm telling you, in the middle of this
Yeah.
amorous, I'm sitting next to my girlfriend. All of a sudden, I'm just like, "Wait a minute, the Ultimate Warrior beat Hulk Hogan?" And it's all, and from that point on, it ruined the night because it's all I wanted to
You were
talk.
back.
I was
It
like, "Wait
ruined
a
the
minute.
night,
Wait,
but
can I
but
talk to your dad? Like, what was it any good? Like, how did he beat him? Did he beat him clean?" Like, it's all I wanted to
Yeah.
know.
You know yeah, I have a similar story. Mine doesn't involve any girls, but I was also, out of it around '89, and it was also
it was
that
90,
Mania
by
and
the
that
way.
match that brought me back in.
90.
And, I think it's timely because I think it is the next time that WWE kinda got the formula right, because one of the
Right.
interesting things was they went from WrestleMania III, which was this amazing looking WrestleMania, this big giant stadium with the big main event and like a really, a well-developed undercard, to next year, like the complete like antithesis,
Yes,
this
and where was it?
antiseptic, this small crowd, a tournament where you didn't know what the matches were gonna be, no build.
Non-wrestling fans surrounding
Yeah, I mean, that was so
Green
bizarre.
Stadium.
Yeah.
Right, because
Oh,
it was at Trump Plaza. Donald Trump was in the front row naturally. I guess Elon Musk wasn't born yet. and, and and they were giving out tickets to the high rollers. Like I
yeah,
remember, I was at WrestleMania 4 and 5, and I remember they would have these events where the wrestlers would have like a breakfast
yeah, I
with
remember Mr.
the
Fuji,
high
right?
rollers from
Yeah.
Trump's casino. And these kids would be parading around proudly, like, "Yeah, my dad's a high roller." So Trump was there too. Donald Trump got him tickets to this breakfast with Hillbilly Jim. And I felt they should just put up a sign like, "Celebrate the fact that your father is a diseased gambler."
I don't know if either of you know this, did they commit to 2 years at Trump Plaza from right
Must
at
have,
the
because
outset?
it was 2 years back to back. But
And after the first year, I can't imagine you'd wanna go back because it was so dead.
it sucked. But
Yeah.
and it's funny you say that. I may have even discussed this with Brian. But My friend Randy Tyson, who owns the bar DDT, used to be in Brooklyn. Now it's in Vegas. When I'll be there, I'm actually going to be doing a signing there WrestleMania week. One night we watched WrestleMania 4 without the sound on, and it wasn't bad. The tournament was not bad, but I was there live, and I remember just feeling so flat.
Mhm.
So, but I understand now, in hindsight, what WWE was doing. They were, you know, trying things out with sponsors, and Trump Plaza agreed to sponsor WrestleMania, and that was a big thing. At a big corporate name. Now it's like Snickers presents. There's all these sponsors. Real American Beer. Uh, Logan Paul's. It's not an energy drink.
It's
I
a
think
hydrating drink.
hydrate.
Keith. There you
As
go.
opposed to drinks that don't hydrate you.
Right.
Yeah.
As opposed to
It's
orange.
toxic swill that I won't let my son drink. That's what it is.
Fans and
Yeah.
But back then, it was a major thing that a casino was sponsoring a WrestleMania like it's a major boxing event.
Yeah.
Right,
Because
right.
WrestleMania 3, going back to the book, shifted everything in that direction. And it took WWE a while to get it right and figure out, how do you make this work? How do you get the sponsor,
Yeah.
but don't run off the fans?
Well, the other thing that's interesting, I imagine if it was up to them, they'd always have that packed stadium, and for the last 20 years, they've been able to, by and large. But there were years where they just couldn't, right? I mean, I think
No,
about
they couldn't.
where they booked the LA Coliseum,
Yeah.
and they just couldn't fill it, right? So
I remember I was writing for the magazine. I remember, now he's dead, so I can say it. Lou Gianfrido, who was one of the writers, that was my buddy. And he was saying, like, yeah, they think they're going to sell out the stadium and tickets in the LA Forum, and tickets just aren't selling. They're going to have to move it. And they're going to make up some excuse. It was the Sergeant Slaughter match.
Yeah.
Slaughter against Hogan, like, because of security.
Yeah.
But I think the Iraq War had ended all that. But because of
yeah.
concerns about terrorism, it was being moved to a smaller building.
Well,
Right.
That leads to the question back to WrestleMania 3. How much of it, and I think what you just told us about, essentially forcing everybody in a 100-mile radius to go if they wanted to see it. How much was that? How much was it? Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. I mean, is that why you had 90,000 people? Would a different main event have because the truth is now they pack stadiums before they announce the first match, right? The brand screwing up.
Which
With
is
the
quite
wrong main event, how would they have done?
Well, I think in that time you needed that big main event. Savage and Steamboat would not have sold out that stadium. And you needed the worked history between Andre and Hulk Hogan, because at that time, everybody in the United States and Canada knew who Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan were. They had crossed over enough, not that everyone was watching, but I remember I was freelancing for USA Today at the time, and all the reporters, all the editors, they knew I wrote about wrestling, and they were pretty into it, and they were talking about, they knew about Andre and Hogan, and they knew about Savage and Steamboat. They knew Jake the Snake. They knew Alice Cooper was involved. They were pretty plugged in. It had crossed to a certain point at that stage. It didn't last. It was part of, in mainstream culture, it was part of a fad. But even more so, like everyone knows that John Cena is a villain. Like, people in the straight world. Do they know who Cody Rhodes or Roman Reigns are? I'm not sure.
Well, John Cena's not helping, right? I don't think he's mentioned his name once.
Yeah,
In
maybe,
the last
yeah,
few
maybe
weeks.
that's
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and it's interesting because I'll have that debate a lot where there's no you think about what's the hottest period. There's no argument that they're making the most money now. There's no question about it. It's the most profitable. But in terms of that pop culture visibility, I don't think it's well, I mean, you could certainly debate whether it's at the level of the Attitude Era or the level of The Rock and Wrestling, Hulk Hogan. I mean, I just rewatched WrestleMania 1, which today is the 40th anniversary as we're recording this. And I was even thinking watching that, like, is wrestling as hot as it is now and as profitable and as comparatively primitive as it was then? Was it a bigger deal with Mr. T and Cyndi Lauper and WrestleMania and the Garden? And I think it probably was bigger then in that sense. MTV and Saturday Night's Main Event. I think it was more high profile then.
More high profile. Now it's more of a select audience, but a loyal audience. I mean, look, you know this, Brian. For years, the attitude was, well, wrestling fans don't really have the resources to spend money. So that's why the advertisers were not, you didn't see car ads.
Right. X-ray glasses was those were the
That was
advertisements.
in the Bill
Yeah.
the X-ray glasses, which I always wanted to buy them. Maybe I couldn't convince my parents to buy them.
Well, you could send it to the
There's also
P.O. box. Maybe they're still available.
Do you remember there was like a love doll that they used to sell?
I certainly do. Yes.
It looked like a naked girl and like her nipples would be blocked off by tape.
I've known people, I think John McAdam said this on his podcast. I've heard people say that they weren't even allowed to have wrestling magazines out in the house. Like their mother would freak out because it was basically almost like having a Playboy out because of all the
because there was
content. It was so the blood, right? The apartment wrestling,
love
all
dolls,
that.
apartment house
Yeah.
wrestling. Right. It was,
Well,
a lot of the wrestling magazines, I wrote porn when I started out. When I started writing, getting paid to write, I used to write for porn magazines and wrestling magazines, not the after magazines, but the after magazines they put out, like that company put out detective magazines. I think they might have put out at one point a Western magazine, Western, not a Western like Stanley magazine. But porn magazine, I think like Wrestling's Main Event was owned by a company that also put out some porn magazines. Because I have a memory of going up to write for one of the porn magazines and there being wrestling magazines there and asking if I could take like a couple of them home.
Well, they were close together on the newsstands. That's all I remember. So
back to WrestleMania 3.
back to WrestleMania 3, Al, right?
Things away from the porn conversation. But as far as again, people remember Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan. People remember Ricky Steamboat and Macho Man. I think less so the rest of the card. But one thing we've talked about here just recently, relative to AEW's pay-per-view, is what is the formula for a great event? And people have, some people have praised Revolution, the most recent AEW pay-per-view, and other ones because of match quality, because there were 4, 5
were great matches
in a row. And my thought is like that's not how you do it, and that's not necessarily a good thing, especially when there is there's sort of a repetitiveness about it, right? I mean, you had like 2 bloodbaths on that show. WrestleMania 3, I think, was one of the early super cards that really got it right, and that means, and there's not a lot of great matches on it, but there's a lot of variety, right? There's
It's a diverse.
Yes, there's somebody getting their hair cut. There's Brutus Beefcake turning babyface. There were Alice Cooper coming out with Shake the Stick.
There's little people.
Yes,
there's Hillbilly Jim,
and it was consistently entertaining throughout the whole show.
Right,
Yes,
and they're very different types of matches. So you could say that Vince McMahon was at the forefront of DEI initiatives. I guess if you were a little person, there was equality.
Yeah, and I heard you talk about it on another show. Adonis and Piper. I know everybody remembers Savage and Steamboat, but I'd argue that Adonis and Piper was really got next billing. That was probably the second most hyped match for this show.
I think it
because
was.
It had that storyline that went months and months and was red hot with the attacks on the set of the flower shop
Yes.
and all that. Yeah, and Cowboy Bob Orton turning on Piper. This was a huge storyline.
It was a really big
Easily over.
Cowboy Bob Orton, who started wearing a pink cowboy hat because he was
Yes.
hanging
It
out
was-
with Adrian
right.
Adonis.
I mean, you
Right.
think
And it was supposed to be Piper's retirement match, right? I mean, Piper
Yes,
disappeared
and
for a while.
that was a shoot. Piper really did think he was going to retire.
Well, he was leaving to make They Live, right?
Yes, which is a great movie. I mean, this is the other thing, and we can, this is another show, but the casual nature in which transphobia was just embraced by everybody, probably
Forget transphobia, homophobia.
members of
I
the
mean,
LGBTQ community. was just,
yeah.
There- it was like Piper came onto the flower shop. I mean, allegedly, Adonis had gone into so much trouble, he was forced to play this cross-dressing character. And he played it. Everything Adonis did, he did well.
Yeah.
He was, even when he was overweight, he was a great bump taker in the ring. He had that, all that background in Japan where he could really work. And even playing that character, he was so over the top. It was really funny. And there was one interview, I haven't been able to find it, but he was like sarcastic and he's dressed in a like a muumuu and has like this, billowy hat on. And then at the end of the interview, he just says, "And may the Lord be your constant companion." So he's like mocking like fundamentalist Christians and trans people at the same time. And none of that was scripted. So he was so great. And I just think, that was a match everyone wanted to see.
Yeah, and it paid off, and it was fun. Again, like, I don't know that work rate literally, I don't know that work rate was a word back then. You knew, I mean, with Piper and Savage, I remember, and I was, what was I, 8 years old, 9 years old, and saw it at the Nassau Coliseum on the big screen. Was my first, like, closed circuit, TV experience. And, Savage and Steamboat was the first match that I remember thinking like, wow, now this is different than everything else I've ever seen. It was the first great wrestling match I ever saw.
I bet you've seen any of the NWA matches.
I grew up in New York without cable, so yeah, I wasn't watching. Right,
Because
I
obviously,
hear that all the time. Is that for NWA fans? It was all right. Yeah,
NWA fans considered all the near falls.
That's what made it.
they considered it a great match too. Chris Jericho, when I was on his podcast, he said that he and his friend, they reenacted that match over and over again with every single near fall.
yeah.
That's what got me. I was a very new fan at the time, and I still remember that feeling because I went to see it with my grandfather, and that was a standout thing for me, that match, because again, part of it is I'm a new fan. I haven't seen a lot of wrestling matches, but it was the constant, sounds so crazy now because this is now every big match, but it was that constant sense of, oh my God, it's almost over. No, it's not. Oh my God, he almost got him. No, he didn't. And that kept happening. And it wasn't even that long. It was a 15-minute match, but I'd never had a feeling like that as a fan before. And what's happened now is every big match now copies that and extends it out to a half hour, 40 minutes. So maybe it doesn't seem like as big of a deal when you go back and watch it now, but it's the influence that made it so
And
important.
think about what that led to. It led to what the product was in the 90s.
Yes.
When you had matches with Shawn and Brett who could perform at that level. And but what it also did was obliterate this notion that WWF is sports entertainment. It's cartoonish. And the NWA, and even to a degree the AWA, that was real wrestling. This was like, no, guys, we defy you to put on a match at this level. And look, they came back, the NWA, with Flair against Sting on Night of Champions the same day as WrestleMania 4. So they could do that. But it was sending a clear message. We're not limited.
Right, they were saying we could do it, but for us, it's part of the whole package, it's not the whole package, but we can do it, and we incorporate it as part of our show, which was that was the different philosophy, because the Crockett's of the world and all of those were basically saying that, and even that is the number one main priority, and Vince was saying, it's just a piece of the puzzle."
Right.
Yeah, if anything, I always sense, and you guys might know better than I would, having worked with the guy, that Vince wasn't nearly as happy with that match as everybody else, because he didn't look to replicate it for the foreseeable future. I mean, like, it wasn't like it was oh wow, so people like this, let's give them more of this. The next year at WrestleMania, a lot of folks were hoping that there would be the Steamboat Savage
Rematch.
a rematch in the tournament, because they might have ended up in the brackets, and there wasn't. And there were other matches that had the opportunity for great work rate, because you had great work rate wrestlers in them. I think Valentine and Savage,
Yeah,
or
but yes, Valentine's.
none of them were anything.
Well, that was DiBiase and Savage.
That was a good match.
DiBiase and Savage was very good.
Well, I have a thought on that, Keith. I don't know if you had something you wanted to say, but on Vince's opinion of the Savage Steamboat match, because in one of the interviews I did with him, where it came up because we were talking about it was the 10th anniversary of Monday Night Raw or something, and I don't know how it came up, but the attitude I got from him, it was very clear to me, was he was talking about WrestleMania 3, and he had a sense of almost resentment at the way that Savage Steamboat was the match that everybody wanted to talk about instead of Andre Hogan. And he sort of said it to me like, yes, I wanted Savage and Steamboat to perform, and that was their place on the card. But, Hogan and Andre is what drew the house. Like, the way he always looked at it was the best match is the match that draws the most money and draws the most fans.
Yes,
And so
that may be true.
I think he was bringing it up because we were talking about Raw versus Nitro, and he was saying how they were putting so much of an emphasis on opening the show with this crazy cruiserweight match that grabs all this attention. And he was trying to say, like, you don't want those matches to overshadow your main attraction. Like, that's really the way that he looked at it.
I agree. I mean, I think he's by and large right, and I did think that was kind of the big difference between WCW and WWE during that era, was that WCW was their good work was lower in the card in matches that didn't matter as much, and they would kind of crap the bed in the main event month after month after month. WCW's main events by and large were terrible.
Yeah, they were terrible.
And WWE's mid cards were forgettable, and undercards forgettable, but their main events were always fantastic, especially in the years that they had Rock and Austin and Shawn and Brett. I mean, they would give you a great main event. The undercard was forgettable, but I think that formula is I mean, there's different ways of doing it, but I think time has proven that's the better way to do it, and that's the way that boxing's always done it, and other sports. The rest is sort of filler, and it should be more than filler.
Yes, and Savage and Steamboat were definitely more than filler.
Right. I mean, I do think now, 40 years later, WWE has kind of figured it out. I mean, the last, because of that, there is sort of a sameness of WrestleManias for the last few years, especially since they've broken it into 2 nights. And I think if you went from, what we were used to for years and years and years in WrestleMania, and then you dropped a WrestleMania 38 or 39 or 40, and I'm sure 41, you'd think like, oh my God, this is the greatest show of all time. Now we've kind of gotten used to them being really good. I don't doubt that WrestleMania this year.
I mean, nowadays we have people who've come up through the Performance Center, and they don't get out of that Performance Center if they're not great athletes. So I think you have a card where across the board, whether you have the Street Profits in there, or whether you have, A-Town Down, all those people really work. They can really perform. Chad Gable's a former Olympian. Otis is a great wrestler. So that's very different than back then,
Right.
where I'm not so sure how much versatility guys like Hillbilly Jim who was always a great guy, but I'm guess Hillbilly Jim and King Kong Bundy, could they really work beyond just doing big man matches?
Yeah, yeah, it's true. Like
Right.
the standard is so much higher, and you're right. I think about a guy like an Austin Theory again. In if he time traveled back to 1987 and appeared on WrestleMania, everybody's mind would be blown by how he looks, the stuff he can do, all that stuff. And today it's
And
like
now he's just another guy on the
he won't
card,
even make
right?
it on the
Now
show.
he'd be the NWA champion, like after Magnum TA was in.
Yeah.
No
You know,
joke.
when I was doing the Gorilla book, I have an interview in there, and I won't mention his name here, but if you read the book, you'll figure it out. But there's a TV tech, a sound tech for that used to work for WWF, and he went way back. Like he was one of the first ones that Vince hired, and he lasted into the Attitude Era. And he was telling me he was very candid, and he wasn't a wrestling fan. He was just an impartial observer. And he was saying things that a purist fan would cringe to hear, right? But there was some truth to it. He was saying how the big difference he saw that happened over the years he was there. He was saying how, in the early years, in the 80s and stuff, he was saying, look, the fact is a lot of those guys, and this is his words, were not some phenomenal athletes. They were carnies. They were a lot of he said some guys were, but he said a lot of the guys were just, they didn't even have a great look. They just, they knew how to get over. They knew certain things to do and tricks. And he said what he saw happen in the 90s was all of a sudden the standard. And he said it started in the Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels era. And then you had Austin and Rock and all that. He said the standard was so much higher where you couldn't really fake it anymore. Like you had to be a very fine-tuned athlete. You had to be able to do incredible things. And that was the norm. It wasn't just a handful of guys that you kept around. And, I cringed when he said it because I have such respect for those great workers of the 80s.
Yes.
But there is a little kernel of truth in there, isn't
But
there?
yeah, I that because I was around when we used to get wrestling from the Olympic Auditorium in Spanish. I've told you this is how I learned how to speak Spanish, and like Kenji Shibuya against Freddie Blassie. Those were older men who
Mhm.
were had kind of bellies, and there was a lot of punching and kicking and biting. In Kenji Shibuya's case, uh, worked karate chops. And they technically, those were not WrestleMania caliber matches.
I also think though that some of those guys on the undercard at WrestleMania and WWF in general at the time were better than we saw, but they knew their role. They weren't supposed to shine that bright because you look at
Right.
Well,
from the first match, Rick Martel, fantastic worker, right?
Right.
Zach was a great athlete. Bob Orton was an all-time
Magnificent Morocco.
Morocco. Butch Reed is on this card. Harley Race is on this card.
Right.
Tito Santana, Bret Hart, the Bulldogs, the Rougeaus were super talented. So there were.
I think what it comes down to is there was more of an and this is why I still prefer to watch that stuff. There was more of an emphasis on psychology over athleticism a lot of the time, whereas now it's this very high octane athleticism. And for some of the older fans, they find the psychology is a little bit lacking, So like you could,
I do feel that the way Cena turned
that was awesome.
shocking.
Yes.
It was a shocking turn. And, I don't know, do I completely buy into the whole, this is an abusive relationship angle? I mean, people are into it. So, it's not always presented for me. And that's something I learned working in the wrestling business. It may not be my thing, but it's someone. There are movies that we all like that the average person doesn't see any appeal in, or even like cult movie. Like I'm a big John Waters fan, but like I have friends who would be offended to watch a movie like Female Trouble or Pink Flamingos.
Yes.
So not everything is always for me. It's for the people. It's for the fans as a whole. It's for the
I was thinking we might take this conversation until after you have to head out. But since we're talking about it, let's talk about it. I've got to say, I've been disappointed with the follow up to the John Cena heel turn. I agree, it was one of the great turns. Maybe it's timely because Andre is a good comparison. I mean, in terms of like shocking all time turns, that was telegraphed more over weeks and weeks and weeks. But it also the payoff, even with Andre with this limited ability to speak, thankfully he had Bobby with him, but it was a kind of believable payoff. Remember the trophies every week, and Andre's trophy wasn't quite as big, and there was this whole sense of like, I'm tired of being in the taking the back seat to you. So we get the Cena turn, and so much build up, and then so much anticipation for the follow up, and I think Cena has been fine to good. I don't think the explanation has really worked at all. I mean, we haven't heard anything about The Rock or the whole Soul
No, The
Cell.
Rock's name doesn't come up, and like
We haven't heard him bring up Cody. I mean, all he's doing, he's sort of cosplaying a heel, and like, you fans stink. And some of it's worked really well. We talked, Brian, in the last episode about, what were we expecting? Are we going to get a different entrance music and Cena in a suit? And that was a way to do it. I like that he's basically kept the same act, and I think that works. There was a moment last week where he came out and there was still the little kid next to him at ringside with all the Cena gear, and he just kind of gives him a look and doesn't really do much else. But I like some of that. I don't think the delivery has been, and it's less the delivery than the content. Doesn't make a lot of sense. And now we've got 2 weeks of it that were almost exactly the same. I mean, I don't know.
However, the fans who were there live are reacting to this.
They'd react to anything.
Yes,
I mean,
but they're screaming their
well,
heads
there's a better
off
way to do it.
if it says a word. So
Yeah.
it's like, let's go back to like, Vince McMahon's attitude about WrestleMania III. It doesn't matter what we think. We're insiders and we're older men. It matters what that kid in the Cena gear thinks, because that's a long time investment. That kid will be watching with his or her kid after we're dead. And so, that kid will remember. Every week means something to that kid.
I have to defend it. I'm going to defend it because I feel like, I know, Al. Yes, I did telegraph the Cena heel turn. I didn't so much as
You did.
I didn't so much predict it as say I wish it would happen, right? And when I envisioned it, this is how I envisioned it playing out. I mean, this is exactly what I thought was the way to do it. Whereas where your motivation is the fans, your motivation is for 20 years you have been dumping on me, and I've had to smile and I've had to eat all the crap that you fed me. No matter what I did, it wasn't good enough. In any other era, he would have been Hulk Hogan, Bruno Sammartino,
Right.
and now he's got half the people booing him everywhere he goes.
Right.
That is the motivation more than Cody. I hear what you're saying, how, it might hurt the main event a little, hypothetically, if Cody isn't the target, but I almost feel like there's so much heat on Cena's turn and everything that it's like ready-made. You don't even need to make it all about Cody. Once you put Cody in the ring, or the minute Cody comes out and confronts him every time, like, it's electric, just because there's so much heat on Cena's change of attitude.
That's so what you're saying is he doesn't even have to mention Cody because Cody is the counterbalance.
Mhm.
So the moment Cody comes out, he's over. And I will say this. I was worried that if it was because when Cena won Elimination Chamber, he hadn't beat up Cody yet. I was like, oh my God, is that going to be like the WrestleMania in Toronto when Hogan was cheered and Rock was booed? And
Yeah.
it's too early for Cody to get booed out of the building like that. That would be bad for Cody and bad for WWE.
Right.
Now there's not a chance that Cody's.
Yeah. Keith, let me ask you, has there been, whether it's Cena and Cody, and my answer to this is know, at least as far as this match, has there been a main event as big as Hogan Andre? And as far as a few candidates, Hogan Warrior felt like a big deal when it
It
happened.
did at the time.
Yeah.
It-
Rock Cena was a real big deal, I think. Cody and Roman was a real big deal. I'm trying to think of
yeah,
other.
the second Cody Roman. Yeah.
What is it?
Austin Rock at the Astrodome, I
Austin
have
Rock,
to
yeah,
submit.
Cody is a bigger deal because I think that Cena's turn is the equivalent of Andre's turn.
Do you feel that this
doesn't-
has the potential of being on the same level as Hogan Andre?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, although, well, maybe not because everyone in America knew who Hogan and Andre were. Everyone pretty much knows who Cena is. Again, the average person, if I go around the corner, the average person probably does not know who Cody is. However, there's this bodega I go to around the corner. And for people outside New York City, a bodega, it's a Dominican term, which means like a convenience store. And it's owned by this Palestinian family. And the young guy who works there is 24. He grew up as a Cena fan. And, that was like his introduction to America. He's pretty wound up about this, and he's watching SmackDown and Raw every single week, like, from the moment it goes on to the moment it goes off. So they brought like guys like that back. And yes, in this era when there were so many choices, when you can go on your phone and just veer off on whatever your entertainment fetish is. Maybe there's nothing is quite like that because, then Hogan Andre, there were fewer options. But this is a pretty big thing.
Yeah. Brian, what are the main events that you remember being, if not on par, close to Hogan Andre?
Well, I was saying one that I said, what I first thought of when you were saying that is Rock and Austin at the Astrodome.
Yes.
Was immense. Now, I was there too. I was at that one. I was at 10. I was at that one, and I was at the Trump one in 2007. And the Astrodome WrestleMania in general, 17, is very, very special to me.
I think it's maybe the closest they've come to replicating 3, even all these years later. In part because of the setting and the size and the main event, but also what we talked about, the undercard. It was a little bit of that. I mean, they even like the gimmick battle royal. It was a real fun
tables, ladders, and chairs.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
It was up and down the card.
You actually had people forget. Yeah, you could make a case for that, and people forget that it had the first big Undertaker Triple H match on it before their more famous ones. It had Angle Benoit, which is tough to talk about now, but was an unbelievably incredible match.
In terms of, want to talk about work rate,
right? And that's the thing. The reason that I mentioned it as the main event was you had this Austin Rock. You had this incredible build. People talk about the Limp Bizkit My Way or the Highway, the greatest WrestleMania hype video that there ever was. I mean, I get chills thinking about it now. But the reason I point to that main event is because to me, out of all the WrestleMania main events, it had the best combination of being a very, very well-built match and feud and a match that delivered in terms of excitement. As a match itself, it was a fantastic match. And it kind of had both things because people will say, "Oh, Hogan Andre, once the bell rang." Even though I love that match still, but Austin versus Rock, man, that match had so much. Those guys were great, and you didn't have and then of course the only fly in the ointment is the most ill-advised heel turn of all time at the end. That's the only thing that takes away from it. And again, I could tell you from being there, the deflation of the audience was really uncomfortable and painful. It was not in a good way. It was a very people forget now because it's remembered as a great show. It was a very excited audience. They were so happy to be there. It was the first, it was like the return to the stadium again, and you had the strobe light. The production value is incredible. And I remember people filing out at the end, and they were just pissed off, and it wasn't a good pissed off. They were just they
It
were
was bad.
depressed. They were confused. They were in the parking lot. I'm telling you, just absolutely dejected. And fortunately, I think that's been forgotten more over the years. But
I forgot it.
yeah,
I
it's
forgot it. And so you're right about that. But I know I wasn't there, but I do remember. I remember the excitement of watching that show. But when you talk about people being dejected, it always reminds me of like going to the Garden. And there was one guy who you and I both know. He's writes about wrestling sometimes. He's actually a very sweet guy, not a Burroughs guy like us. And like since like the Bob Backlund era, I would see him on the subway go, "That's it. I'm never going again." And he's still going.
yeah, there's a lot of those guys. Yep.
Are you a believer, Keith, on this topic that WrestleMania should end with a happy ending? Because a few, by and large, it has, but there are a few exceptions. That was one. A couple years ago with
39.
Cody losing to Roman was another.
Yeah, but Roman, I was at the press conference afterwards, and Roman said, "This isn't fast food. This is long-term story."
Right, and there wouldn't have been a WrestleMania 40 were it not for the finish of WrestleMania 39.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was a gamble that paid off. I would not have the courage to do that. I'd be afraid that I would scare away all the fans.
Yeah. Well, also everything has to go right. I mean, even if they had a plan, it almost didn't, right? Because The Rock swept in and for a moment there they weren't even going to do the match. But it all did work out. I think there's a good chance that this is a year that we kind of send fans home on a sad note, right? I mean, if Cena is to win 17,
I mean, I don't think that's
balancing. You're balancing setting fans happy with creating a real historic moment.
Talking.
Yeah,
That's good
exactly.
heat, not bad. I mean, look, after WrestleMania 39, fans were agitated.
Yes.
And that's why Roman
was one.
said this isn't fast food. But people were like, "Oh, how are we going to stretch this out another year?" And Vince was still in charge then. Vince saw what we did not see by the time we got to WrestleMania 40. No more Vince, but they pulled it off.
Yeah. Well, I know you got to run, Keith. We'll stay on a few more, but tell people about the book. What else is in there? I mean, it's a WrestleMania that's been written about a lot. So I
never liked it.
I was going to say, I imagine it was a challenge for you to find things that people have never written about or talked about.
Well, yeah, I mean, I mean, where they can find them, it's called Bigger, Better, Badder, WrestleMania III and the Year It All Changed. It's about how that WrestleMania changed not just WWE and the perception of pro wrestling, but what it did to the entire industry. And what gave me great pleasure was the fact that I was able to interview so many people who were around at the time. And, as Brian and I always discuss with his books, it's a small window. Not everyone's going to be around. I intend to be around for a long time, but if I'm not, I leave this book behind. And I think it's the best book I've ever read. And I'm not demure about my abilities. Like, I think I've written some great books, but I think this is the best book I've ever read.
I heard you talk about it in terms of the kind of the granular stuff you have in here. I heard you talking about a rehearsal for how long it took to shave somebody's head ahead of the that angle.
Yeah, and they had to get a member of the ring crew to get his head shaved.
Yeah, to know how long it takes, so you would time the show properly and it not.
Right.
And wasn't there an issue though? I mean, it took a while to really.
Yeah, I remember they couldn't really get his hair off. Adrian Adonis had a very thick head of hair.
Yeah,
because I remember Brutus really didn't get his hair off his head.
no.
And then the next week on TV, Adrian's head was shaved, and he came out and looked into the camera and made an insane face with a bald head. And then it hit like that.
Yeah. I was disappointed as a kid when I was watching the show live, like, oh, he didn't really cut his, he trimmed part of it. But I just want to say, because what you just said, I believe is true. I read the book, and I think I've read all your books, Keith. This is the best one. I always had a real soft spot for the Blassie book. I
Right, I
real
still do.
which I still say is the best biography that WWE officially put out as in their
Other
official
than the
line.
Foley.
Okay, let's say the best a ghost written biography.
Not
How about
close
that?
and co-authored.
A co-authored biography. Yeah, I could see that, but this is, I think, your best one. So I'm gonna rubber stamp that.
Yes, go out and get it bigger, better, better.
Bigger, better, badder.
Bigger, better, better. I remember the tagline from back in the day.
that
Yeah,
was the
WrestleMania 2 was what the world has come to.
No,
WrestleMania 3.
it's not. That's not what the world's come to. That's
No, that was WrestleMania 2.
What
Right.
the world is watching.
No, that was 3.
What the world's come to. That's like something like that. My
That's now.
Hey, what the world has come to. No, WrestleMania 4 was what the world is watching. That's
Yeah,
when they
what the world
debuted that.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Anyhow,
I jump
yes.
off because I-
Thank you, Keith. I appreciate it. We'll have you back on soon.
It's great. It's great talking to both of you guys.
Okay, man.
Likewise, Keith. Bye-bye.
Have a good one.
Bye.
All right, Brian. I don't want to spend too much more time, but yeah, let's talk a little more WrestleMania buildup because there have been some significant happenings since then. Not the least of which is the other main event is official. I expected that they would. Well, let me ask you this: do you think there's a chance that the triple threat match, Roman, Seth, and Punk, actually closes both nights? I mean, you could have. That could have been a takeaway from what Paul said on SmackDown. I can't imagine that's the case. But again, if you're debating maybe getting fans home happy, can you have Cena win the title on night 1 and actually close with a victorious Punk celebrating on night 2? I don't think so.
I still don't think so. No,
Yeah.
I don't think that's your second night main event. I just don't. And if it was, I would only see it as a failure.
Yeah.
Of the Cena turn, of Cody as a champion. The fact that you have a match like that and it can't close out the weekend, and you have to pick something else to close out the weekend, that is something's gone wrong if that happens.
Yeah, yeah. Again, back to Cody and Cena. I know you're okay with it, but there's some things. There is the execution of it, and I think in a vacuum it's fine. I think some of what I've struggled with is sort of reconciling it with the actual turn on that night, because you have to sort of like walk, for The Rock to have been able to trigger Cena with the one gesture, they would have had to have planned this. I know in some ways this is like wrestling fans get in trouble for overthinking it, but I do want an internal logic to it.
Well,
So Rock and Cena had this conversation. What was the plan? What does it have to do with this? I mean, I don't know that it all makes sense.
Right. You're right about, or I agree with the fact that there should be some mention of The Rock in all this. Now, as part of the motivation, because that's part of the spin of it. Rock's Hollywood. Rock, I feuded with Rock years ago and I stood up for integrity, and The Rock was Hollywood, but The Rock is right. You people suck and The Rock is right. And now I understand because I'm in Hollywood. Like, that should have been part of it. I think that they've minimized The Rock, most likely because he's not really going to be doing much in this match, or not really going to be maybe physically involved in any way. If maybe he'll be in Cena's corner. But if that's the case, even if The Rock wasn't really going to be playing a huge part, he still should have been addressed as part of the reason for the turn. Absolutely. I agree with that for sure.
Yeah, yeah. As far as other developments, the triple threat match is official. I think it's fine in that there's a lot of star power, and they have done a fine job of building up a three-way feud there. We have so many of these, though, right? I mean, like it looks like there's probably going to be a half a dozen, multi-person matches. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little, but
few.
The other women's match is going to be a triple threat. It looks like they're probably going to be something for the US or Intercontinental title that are also multi-person matches. So I'm always sort of uneasy because there's always a feeling of like, well, you're just trying to squeeze as many people into a match as possible. And to me, it's clear that the real star power in this match is Roman and Punk. They kind of had the same situation last year, also with Seth in the night one main event, the tag team match, where the stars were Cody and Roman and Rock, and oh yeah, Seth is in this match too. And it feels like Seth is sort of being shoehorned into something,
Yeah.
that, it just doesn't feel organic.
No, and I think 2 things on that. I think the match would have been far more intriguing and hot if it was just purely Reigns versus Punk, and you've got Heyman caught in the middle. And I know they did the Heyman caught in the middle thing with Reigns and Lesnar, but that's fine. You can do it again. It would have it felt much more pure to me. I'm necessarily not the biggest fan of the triple threats. And this match is a good example of why that's the case, because it does feel like, oh yeah, and Seth too, because he had an issue with Punk that they have already settled conclusively, but we're gonna throw him in there anyway. But again, I do not like to see this kind of creep back to the multitude of multi-person matches, which is really just to get everybody on the WrestleMania card and get everybody that piece of that WrestleMania pie. And while that's nice, and I don't want to sound like a stick in the mud, I think your priority has always got to be put on the best card you can put on, the big guns and the big matches that people want to see, and a few undercard matches. And you don't owe anything to anybody to have to be on the card. You just don't. Like, look, like I said before, I watched WrestleMania 1 again because I was doing a Patreon thing involving WrestleMania 1. And I was researching it. You look at the roster, people forget this. In 1985, the people that were in WWF that were not even on the show, Rocky Johnson was there. Ken Patera was on. He hadn't gone to jail yet. They just weren't on the show.
Well, the Bulldogs were already there. Paul Orndorff was already
Yes.
there. The Bret Hart was.
Well, Orndorff's in the main event, but
Oh right, yeah. I'm sorry.
but there were very impressive people on the card. I'm sorry, on the roster, weren't on the show when I did the
Don
Gorilla.
Morocco, another one, yeah.
Don Morocco, right, was on the roster, wasn't on WrestleMania. When I did the Gorilla Book, when they did the big and Ali versus Inoki and Hansen versus San Martino and Shea Stadium show, Bruiser Brody was on the roster at the time and was just not on the show. He was just off doing other stuff somewhere else that day. So, I mean, the priority's got to be your best show. Don't just dump everybody onto the card.
Yeah, I'm okay with multi-person matches lower in the card to get a lot of people on. If it doesn't really matter, I mean, you want to do a 5-way for the Intercontinental title, unless you've got a real compelling storyline between two people, I think it's fine. And I even think, again, and I think we've talked about this, there are times where there are legit 3-way feuds, and for a while, I thought Roman and Seth and Punk could be that, but as if you touched on, I think the issue is like I feel like the Seth thing is settled, and so I don't know why they're dragging it out any further. And even watching that angle, the contract signing Friday night, and Roman is so great. He still is, such a presence, and every time he's in the ring and on the mic, it feels like such a big deal. Punk feels that way, and then kind of whiny Seth is there, and when he was on the mic, I felt like everybody was like, "All right, we've had enough of Seth." As great as he is, he might be the best worker of the three, uh, uh, but it doesn't carry the weight that the other two. The other one is the women's side, and I think it's almost the exact same situation where you have Rhea and Bianca, a match that people have wanted to see for several years,
Right.
and the third WrestleMania main event, and they throw Io in there, and it's no disrespect to Io, who's a super talent, but I just don't think she needs to be there.
No, the match people want is Rhea versus Bianca. You're right. It is very it's frustrating in a weird way. It's like this insistence. And typically, Triple H uh, has been better at all this sort of thing than Vince in his later years was. But this is a frustrating, almost Vince-like thing. It's like this
Yeah.
need to just, we're just gonna cram more people in there instead of what is the match people want to see? It's not even what's the best match. What's the match people actually wanna see, and just give them that match? What is so hard about that?
Well, the one factor maybe we're not considering in both these cases is that it gives you an out, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it gives you somebody to beat. So,
Right, right.
you can,
So
have
Rollins is what you're saying.
right, yep, you can
Right.
have Punk be victorious in the main event WrestleMania without having, Reigns take a loss, and,
Okay, I see that.
same with Bianca and Rhea, even though I think it's less
It's a cop
either
out,
of them
though.
can afford a loss, but I guess EO is a little more beatable, than the other 2. What else on the card? We know, Damian Priest and Drew, is looking likely. Randy and, Kevin Owens. Yeah, I mean, it's as far as the undercard, what do you think about it? Does it
Well,
feel, special?
Gunther and Jey Uso, can't forget that. I mean,
It's
that's
just a world title match,
it's a
yeah.
world title match, which at
And
one
it's looking
time
likely that they open,
they
at the
open,
start.
right. At one time, I guess it looked like it could close night 1, but now that won't be the case. So
It's lost a lot of steam, right? I
I could
mean,
definitely see it opening
yeah.
night 1 or 2, probably night 1, because then you got a world title match on both
I think
shows.
it's all about the entrance, right? I mean, I think
Yep.
that's what it's all about. It's Jay coming out with whatever 50,000 people or as many people. So I think it's a fine way to open it. I think Jay's lost a little steam. I'm not sure I love this. I do like the aspect of his character. I don't know how well it's been executed, but I like that he's got a little self-doubt. He's a little, there's kind of like this, mental health wellness kind of overtones, to it, and not just him, like, tripping and stuff like that, but when he's given promos that, feel sincere, where he talks about self-doubt and, almost like this imposter, syndrome, kinda thing. He's not sure he belongs here,
Right.
and, I like that. I'm not sure they're executing it, that well, and part of it is that, you're competing with the star power of Cena and Cody and, Roman and Punk. It's tough to break into the main event mix with those people.
Right, and I, as the old school fan, I love that idea on paper of Jay having the real doubts, because it would make sense that he would have doubts in a situation like
Correct.
that. It's very interesting, right? But again, but also that's the difference between treating wrestling as a movie and treating it the way they used to treat it, because in my mind, the first reaction I had, and again, my wife is like, "Oh, you're overanalyzing," is I'm thinking Jay is confessing to Jimmy, like, how scared he is and how he can't do it, and I'm thinking, "Why in the world would you let your opponent see this? Why would you say this to your brother while a camera is right in your face filming you?" And I know no one thinks that way anymore, but there are other ways to do it. You could have it where they didn't know they were being filmed, or they're in a room somewhere and somebody catches it and they're not supposed to hear this, because that's the first
Yeah,
thing I think, like, don't let you're letting your opponent know how incredibly scared you are and how you think you can't win. Why would you do that? Well, the reason they do it is because it's a TV show now, you know?
yeah, I think maybe the ship has sailed on
Yes,
that.
it has.
Before we have so as far as, the main event, Cody and, Cena, what has to happen between now we've now had 2 angles. They were almost identical, neither I the second one didn't really move the needle much, or move the football, whatever the analogy is, much past the first one. We still have not quite a month, right? What do we have? 2, 3 weeks. But what needs, to happen? Should it get physical between them? I'm half worried about I always joke about this. At some point, does a car get involved? Does somebody get hit with a car, get
Right.
thrown onto a car? Maybe Damian Priest already checked that box.
Well, this is the point where it comes down to creativity, right?
Yeah.
It can't just be 2 people talking to each other week after week after week. It also doesn't necessarily have to be people getting hit with cars, right? There are things we could do, to make things interesting that don't even always involve physical contact. One thing I'm thinking, maybe they're saving it is that The Rock will appear as it gets closer to the show and reinsert himself, and that would ratchet it up because then they would start doing the things that we're complaining that they're not doing yet. And maybe that's what they're saving towards closer to the show, some type of big statement where it's The Rock and Cena together as a promo. Maybe, that might be what's coming.
Yeah, and I'd like to see, as we were talking about, and I know we talked about why it hasn't been as important up until now, but I do think at some point I would like to see Cena direct his ire at Cody, right? I mean, that's what we haven't gotten, and say, it is part of the resentment and the bitterness that this guy has taken your spot, and it is beloved by the whole crowd where you never would. I mean, he's sort of doing the Cena thing in some ways better than Cena.
Right. Well, I just I had an idea that popped into my head recently, and I'm afraid to say it because maybe they're listening to me and doing
Yeah.
other things. But one thing you could do if you wanted to think outside the box and do something interesting, which isn't necessarily physical, but it could be, but it isn't just two guys talking every week, is you're building this thing up where Cody has taken Cena's place. Cody's loved by kids. He's loved by fans. What if you staged a thing? And I'm not saying Make-A-Wish, that might be tasteless, but if you staged some type of an appearance where Cody is doing the kind of things that Cena used to do, some type of public event, kissing babies, shaking hands, smiling, and Cena shows up and confronts him there. That could be an interesting thing to do that takes it outside the arena, outside the ring. Just a thought.
We've got to get you on WWE Creative. You missed your calling in life. Yeah, absolutely.
Can you imagine? And all of a sudden, let's say it even does get physical, and now you've got like all these kids around that were there to see Cody, and they're reacting to Cena attacking Cody at the meet and greet. I mean, that could be something.
I think they have space for one more, big bring it home angle, because usually that last week of TV, you're just kind of like, tying a bow on it. Sometimes it's just like video packages they do. And one thing that's been kind of a weird X factor is all these trips to Europe. So last, whatever, 3 or 4 weeks have been all these.
What a detour, my God.
Yeah. I mean, I like having Raw in the afternoon.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, played. But the crowds they can be too much, and
I'm a grump about it. I hate to say it's like, all right.
too, especially like, when the 10-minute segment gets dragged out to 21 minutes because
And no one even
nobody's singing.
Right. And I'm sorry, I'm the ugly American, but like the audience doesn't know what the hell they're even saying. It's just this in joke in whatever country they're in, and you're like, all right, can we get on with this now, please?
And it's fine, once every 6 months, but now we've got whatever 4 weeks of it, and it's a bit much. So I would like to see him kind of bring it back to earth, right back to the United States, at least, and that big memorable, last year the Rock beating Cody with the belt and blooding him up outside. I mean, that
was great.
That kind of thing. I think we still need something like that between Cody and Cena to really bring it home. So I hope we get that. And with everything else too. I mean, I guess Seth, Reigns, and Punk need that too. Even though I think Punk's doing such a great job. I mean, I hope he gets the win, and it feels like certainly WrestleMania worthy.
But didn't he say? Oh, I'm sorry to cut you off, but didn't he say in that contract signing promo that this wasn't even the favor? So
it's not the favor. Yeah.
Right.
So what do you think it is, and when do we get it? I've assumed that it could have something to do with Brock Lesnar.
I was thinking that because all along I had thought it would have been this, like, can you get me in this match? Maybe you set it up that it was originally going to be Reigns and Rollins. I don't know. Can you get me in this match because it's the main event? I don't know. But yeah, I guess that's the only other thing I could think of too, that can you bring back Brock Lesnar? For what reason though? I don't know.
And where? I mean, that wouldn't pay off obviously at WrestleMania. I mean, it feels like the Raw after WrestleMania kind of thing. Maybe that's finally the payoff. So yeah, I could see that happening. So I think we probably have time to come back with a full WrestleMania preview before a big show, so we'll do that. We kind of saved the plans here to the end because we knew Keith had limited time. But let me tell everybody, you can pick up the latest issue of Pro Wrestling Illustrated. It is our 4th annual spotlight on Japan. Mina Shirakawa on the cover. Lots of Japanese coverage inside. Go check it out. PWI-online.com, all things PWI. Subscribe there. You could buy back issues. You could get a digital subscription. You could get a print subscription. You could get a combo that gets you both. So you've got the digital edition early, and then the magazine is in your mailbox. WrestleMania, always one of like the highlights of the year, our coverage of it. I know we're working on a Supercards issue. I don't know if it'll include WrestleMania or not, but nevertheless, PWI-online.com is the place to go. Brian, anything you got to promote here?
Sure. I on the book front, Irresistible Force: The Life and Times of Gorilla Monsoon. I think I've said it, but the manuscript is done and approved and edited and everything, and now we're in the photo stage. I've been getting some incredible photos for this book from a lot of sources. The family, WWE is contributing, George Napolitano, and just all different places, even from my own personal collection. So that's going to add another layer to this book. For people that are always asking, the release date for the Gorilla Monsoon biography is September 30th. So I'm going to be keeping people abreast of when pre-ordering becomes a thing. That's not the case yet. It probably won't be till the summer. So we're working on it. And the other thing I want to mention too is my own podcast, Shut Up and Wrestle with Brian R. Solomon, because I've got this week, my guest is going to be Mike Bessler, PWI's own Mike Bessler, who I have never had on till now. So I'm excited. It's a great nostalgic conversation for people that don't know. My show is a vintage wrestling nostalgia podcast. So it's a fun one this week. You can check it out wherever you find your podcasts. It's called Shut Up and Wrestle.
And you mentioned the 40th anniversary of WrestleMania. You do these watch-alongs. Is that one of the Patreon shows?
That's right. Yeah, actually, yes. Yeah, I didn't want to overdo the plug. Yes. So I do a Patreon for Shut Up and Wrestle where I do watch-along commentaries on historic events. And it's patreon.com/Shut Up and Wrestle. It's a $5 subscription to get the commentaries, $5 a month. But the new one I just did is WrestleMania 1 in honor of the 40th anniversary. And that's why I was doing all this research about it and everything. But I just did a commentary on the first WrestleMania, March 31st, 1985, where, by the way, you can see, I didn't get a chance to say this to him, you could see Keith Greenberg make his way down to ringside, a young Keith Greenberg, during the Greg Valentine JYD match. He comes down and he's crouching down by the ring apron where all the photographers are and watching the match from the floor. You can absolutely see, and he confirmed it that it's him. But yeah, it's patreon.com/Shut Up and Wrestle for people that want to subscribe to that. $5 a month. You get all these great commentaries. I've done Clash of the Champions 1. I've done the first Saturday night's main event. I did the Von Erich Parade of Champions, Flair versus Von Erich, all that kind of stuff. It's just every 3 or 4 weeks I put a new one up.
Yeah, not to give away what people should be paying for, but as far as talking about WrestleMania 1, I've always found it one of the harder ones to go back and watch. On one hand, it's so historic. On the other hand, from a production standpoint, it's no different than an MSG house show that they used to
you're right.
every month.
It's an interesting transition, and I talk about it even in the commentary because it's like it's a very solid card, but it's like WWF was putting on monthly MSG cards at the time, and it feels like it could have been any one of those.
Yeah,
but even match wise and production wise, but what puts it over the top is the celebrities. That's
it. That was
people forget now because WrestleMania has morphed so much over the years. But I know even as a kid, the big thing about WrestleMania every year was who are the celebrities going to be? Like that was the big thing they hung it on. And that's what makes WrestleMania 1 special and unique and different from all the other house shows that you had Billy Martin, Liberace, Muhammad Ali, the Rockettes, and people were just like, what are the Cyndi Lauper Mr. T, what are they doing at a wrestling show? That's what made it special more than anything else by far.
Yeah, I mean, the card was I don't wanna say thrown together, that might
No,
be
it's a good card, but it's like every other MSG card that they, big card. It's a solid, it's a huge without Mr. T in that main event, if it had just been like Piper and Orndorff against Hogan and I don't know, Junkyard Dog or stuff.
Yeah.
Or Snuka, right? Or Snuka. That would have been a big main event, but they were doing main events like that every month, you know?
Yeah, yeah, the WrestleMania 2, they kinda went overboard with the celebrities.
Yes.
And as we touched on, 3, I feel like is where they kind of finally figured out that formula, and they didn't always stick to it in the coming years, but, like, 3 really is, uh, perfection might be overstating it, but it was the first WrestleMania to look like WrestleMania, right? I mean, as when
Yes.
we think about WrestleMania, that was the kind of the prototype, yeah.
It was.
All right, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. We will do it again soon. Thanks again to Keith Elliot Greenberg. Pick up his book, and we'll see you guys soon.